so the first rule of touching is you have to touch early. Right? When I think about touching, there's like a little frame here, and the frame is being a touchy guy. Right? Like, a lot of us are not like naturally touchy people. Generally, the more educated you are, the higher level of education you have, you're less inclined to be physical in touch. So that explains why a lot of guys who are really smart who end up in these rooms don't touch much. You have to touch early, because what happens is, if you're talking to a girl for 10, 15 minutes and you don't touch her at all, and all of a sudden you start touching, it's kind of weird. It's like, what changed? What agenda does this guy now have? He's now starting to touch me. However, if you start touching them right away, then they just have to basically decide that you're a touchy person and decide whether or not they want to deal with you. And for most people, they'll be like, okay, they're touchy, but we'll deal with it if they're fun. So touch early. Second rule is touch everyone. Now, I want to make a quick caveat, which is that you don't have to actually literally touch everyone in the group. Like if you guys were like a 9 set, I wouldn't have to be like, hey, 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 hey. What I mean is, don't just touch the girl you're interested in. A lot of guys do that. It's like a really subtle thing that groups pick up on that you're trying to hit on their friend, and it can get you cock blocking. So you want to just make sure you give high fives to obstacles, or you like touch some other people, right? Number 3, end touching first. This is kind of the magic rule of touching. Like, if you can understand this, you will get good at touching. The theory here is women have what I like to think of as comfort thresholds, right? So for every girl is going to be different, you know, like very few girls are going to be comfortable getting fingered right away by a stranger, but, you know, girls in the sex trade industry, porn stars, stuff like that will be, right? But for most normal girls, there's going to reach a point where they're going to get a little uncomfortable with a stranger touching them. It might be, you know, getting pulled in by the waist, it might be having their hand touched, wherever it is. At that point, she's going to want to remove the touching. That's how most guys do touching. Most guys touch girls until the girls take the touching away, and then they keep making moves, and they keep making moves, and they keep chasing the girls until the girl either like eventually relents or she just kind of leaves, right? That's not how we want to treat touching. Instead, we want to always make sure that we end the move first and that we actually push her off. I call it releasing touching, right? So the theory here is, what happens is, when a girl gets rejected physically, she's going to be uncomfortable. She's not going to like that. In fact, she'll become more uncomfortable than she was with having her comfort threshold touched, right? So, for example, if I'm like talking to a girl and I put her hand on my arm and I keep my hand on top of it, right? Because at some point that hand's going to come off the arm. No matter how much she likes you, her hand's not going to stay around your arm all night, right? At some point it's going to come off. So if you don't put your hand on top of it, then when it pulls off, you have to start chasing and like following her again. But if you keep your hand on top of your arm, you'll start to feel when she starts to pull away, or you'll start to feel when she gets tense. And that's when you push her off and you release, and you just go, all right, that's enough. You don't have to verbally say it, but you take the touching away. You push her off of you. I do this with every touching escalation, including kissing. Like, every time I kiss a girl for the first time, I push her off, and I'm like, that's all you get. Why? Because this is how you compel women to physically chase you. Because by making her devalidated and feeling rejected, she's now going to physically escalate more, because that bumps the comfort threshold a little further. Like, maybe she wasn't comfortable having her hand around your arm, but when you push her off, she's way more comfortable with it. Maybe she wasn't comfortable kissing you, but then when you push her off, she's way more comfortable with it. Maybe she wasn't comfortable doing this, that, or the other, but as you push her off, you end the touching first, that comfort threshold moves forward. That's really the secret to touching. So the 2 things to look for, muscular tension, right? If you're trying to pull a girl into you and she's like really stiff and not coming, or she's like super tense, or you feel any of her muscles tense off, push her away. Any muscular tension, push the girl away. Girls do not get muscularly tense when they're comfortable with touching. Really easy thing to feel. Second thing is any like hesitation, or like the girl's hand is about to move, right? So like, for example, if I put a girl's hand on my leg and I feel like it's about to move, I just push it off real quick. Or I move my leg and I actually just take the touching away, right? The idea is that as soon as you see that she's about to end the touching, you end it a little bit first. It takes a little bit of practice and timing, but if you get this, you'll see a huge jump in your ability to physically escalate, because instead of trying to be like the Notre Dame offense of the 1930s and get like 3 yards in a cloud of dust and like run it up the middle every time, also occasionally known as the San Diego Chargers offense under Norv Turner, now you have a bunch of different things that you can do, and you're not just pushing, because that's when the girls get uncomfortable. But if she's always the one reinitiating, she never actually gets uncomfortable. And the last rule, make a bigger move. Hold on 1 second. Make a bigger move. This is huge because a lot of the time, you'll see guys who, I'll come up to them and after set, and I'll be like, you didn't touch enough. And they'll be like, I touched the girl's elbow 20 times. Like, you do not want to go through the same touching more than once. Like, touching a girl's hand or arm 5 times is not as good as going forward in this touching progression ladder that I'm going to teach you guys. You have to be moving forward. You don't want to go backwards through the touching, and you don't want to just go back to the same level. You make a move, you take it away, you make a bigger move. Make a move, take it away, make a bigger move.
Hey, it's Bobby. Before we continue, John, who I learned a lot from, has a demonstration video where he shows how to bring more risky topics up in a conversation and make it easier to escalate. He does it using a technique he calls the sexual ladder, and he's got a really good word-for-word video of him using it on one of his hot female friends. Completely free to watch at johnsin.com/ladder.